Welcome to the Christopher Peter Review, your source of common sense commentary on salient current events. As much as things change over the years, there are many things that remain exactly the same, no matter how hard we try to deny it or try to cloud the truths with narratives. Despite the prevailing opinion that America was enjoying a progressive culture shift or a conservative wave, the reality is the United States of America is a center-right society. That is a good thing. The successful political candidates tend to be the ones that can move to the center in an authentic manner that is believable and real. The problem with ideologues is their core beliefs are hard to hide, and for unseasoned candidates, they can attempt to portray a center-to-center-right position, but they are not believable. And that is what we are seeing with Kamala Harris. Let us have another conversation about the candidates and campaign that we are heading in the final stretch of. I now welcome Jennifer to join us for this important discussion.
Thank you, Christopher. We are heading into the last full week, and the momentum of the race has clearly shifted away from Kamala Harris. Now former President Donald Trump has pulled slightly ahead in most of the usual polls. To make matters worse for Kamala, many newspapers that serve as reliable endorsers for Democratic candidates are sitting this one out. Not that predictable endorsements actually matter to the average voter, but it is alarming to a degree when a paper decides not to do their norm. The voters should look at that as a concern if organizations that have been dubbed as progressive backers will not endorse the progressive candidate. How can we explain this recent spell?
The burden every candidate for political office faces is to be able to develop a message that connects with prospective voters beyond your natural base and deliver it in a believable and authentic manner. Kamala Harris could not really hold leads. The 2 times she earned a lead, and I use the term earned lightly, she gave it right back right away. First when she pushed Biden out, and after the debate when she met the very low bar. Why is that? I believe she is highly unbelievable, and not in a good way. The audience really cannot trust what she is saying because she comes off as inauthentic and gives off the clear feeling that she is just saying things because it is what she thinks you want to hear. Many candidates do that from time to time, but many do not make crystal clear as she does. Her campaign theme is a new way forward. Almost 4 out of every 5 people do not support the current status quo. Yet, she consistently tells us that there is nothing she would change with the Biden-Harris policy approach. Pretty crystal clear that you either have a clear disconnect with the voters or you simply do not care what they want or need. There are still a majority of her supporters who still do not really know what she stands for or what she offers. The campaign platform is largely that she is not Donald Trump. That smug, condescending campaign attitude may appeal to the hardcore progressive base, but the moderate or independent needs more, and she is unable to give them any substantive reason. The string of bad interview after bad interview gives an impression that she might not even know what she stands for. If you talk to any of her supporters, they really do not know what she stands for, other than the same core progressive principles that are a dime a dozen in the progressive pool. Say what you want about former President Donald Trump, but he is more authentically himself and clear what he stands for and what he wants to achieve in a second term. He has been far more disciplined in his campaign despite some hiccups, but he has remained true to himself.
Do Americans just simply trust the former president more than the current vice president? Kind of difficult to truly trust the word of someone who tells you that there is nothing wrong with Joe Biden. Constantly telling the public that Biden is in perfect health, all the while working in concert to push him aside and secure the nomination. The Biden-Harris administration has created too many moments that removed any reason to believe Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Both will lie to you and demand that you believe it.
There is a saying that when a politician is speaking, they are lying. Most may not be completely lying. Many take a bit of the truth or a true event only to manipulate or exaggerate it for their own purposes. But this administration just outright lies. And Kamala Harris, the candidate, continues that practice on the campaign trail. The idea seems to be that if you say the lie confidently, it must be true. But I think people are seeing right through her. As we discussed on the Christopher Peter channel, Kamala is trying to sell the public the idea that inflation is actually price gouging. The facts show otherwise. Companies will need to increase prices when their prices increase and when their supply availability decreases. Under price gouging, you would typically not see a notable change in cost. Under the current inflation, the input prices increased across the board and supplies produced overseas became increasingly difficult to get. Both are still true to some degree today. So why is she telling a clear untruth? First, she exploits the known level of economic illiteracy that exists in society. There is much data showing that Americans do not understand much of the complexities of our financial markets or our economy. Second, the policies that threw fuel on the inflation situation have the Biden-Harris economic policy all over it. And as she said multiple times, she was part of every big impactful decision made by the administration. So she is responsible for inflation. But she does not want to be. She keeps selling a lie about Trump and Project 2025. Unfortunately for her, the Heritage Foundation already acknowledged that they have no connection with Trump on this and he rejected it in its entirety. Usually, political candidates move on when their misinformation proves untrue and they have no further evidence. Sometimes they do not.
Based on the tone of the recent reporting and content, the media outlets are clearly not liking what they are seeing from the shifts in polling. They are trying to elevate the negative stereotype attributed to Donald Trump using the words of anti-Trump politicians. The supposed to be objective media is clearly trying a last-ditch effort again to put a Democrat in the White House, even if it solidifies the distrust by the American public who, regardless of political affiliation or ideological leanings, see the media as propaganda and political marketing to a great degree. The 2016 election severely harmed the media's reputation, who then doubled down on the bias to support the endless hours of affording a platform to the Russia-stolen election hoax, which they now deny. Is the media waving the white flag and admitting that they are uncontrollably driven by their political leanings and biases?
The idea of an objective media is a myth. They are largely made up of people leaning liberal, which is not always a bad thing. There are conservative-minded journalists as well. So it kind of balances out when you look at the industry from a high level. But the modern-day media, especially the liberal-leaning outlets, still rely on the reputational approach because that is what most progressives and liberals. Generally, these individuals believe a person if the person is someone they like or support. They disagree with a person if it is someone they dislike or oppose. This is fringe behavior. Some far rights can be the same way. But the reason why it is a bigger deal now is because some of these media outlets market themselves using reputation as a draw for their content, and all too often the content is purposefully flawed or biased. Most center-rights and center-lefts look at reporting and try to identify the facts and evidence in the content. If the piece is well-sourced and comprehensive, then they will trust it. The issue will always be what is being left out and what does the media know and not telling us that is important in understanding the issue. I remember talking to a reliable Democrat voter who I do enjoy exchanging ideas with. This person is mostly reasonable and tries to at least see that there is another side. At least lately. I remember one exchange when I mentioned the Wall Street Journal. And the person retorted, "Are they not supporters of the right?" Like it was a negative. When I pointed out that they are one of the most reputable papers and is one of the most respected business voices in the media, that person was like, "That is why they have that bias of being for the right." I believe that you should be able to experience a broad range of media content to ensure that you are getting the full picture. Articles from the Wall Street Journal or New York Times can be useful regardless of your ideology. Maybe once the Philadelphia Inquirer improves their editing or basically grammar, they may be included in this group. Kidding to some degree. Many papers have a bias, but the importance is whether the journalist is willing to offer the opposing point of view. Many are not, but these two generally do. And the Wall Street Journal tends to do a good job of giving a fair outlay for all sides. That said, I find it interesting that even in the most biased environment there are some staunchly liberal papers not willing to further harm their reputations with an endorsement. The Washington Post and LA Times are not endorsing anyone, which is interesting and telling. The media does not like Trump, but also seems to have reservations about Kamala and does not want to be on the hook for whatever fallout that may happen either way. If she wins and does a horrible job, they will be blamed for covering for her. If she loses and the Biden people start telling the behind-the-scenes details, they look bad for propping her up. Personally, I do not think endorsements matter. I really could care less that a paper supports one candidate or the other.
Despite the manufactured noise, coordinated attacks, and fabricated claims, elections really come down to ideas, issues, and policy. What ideas do you bring to the table? How do your ideas work better than the opposing set? And are you addressing the issues that matter most to voters? For Democrat supporters, I believe Kamala Harris has struggled mightily in articulating her views and policy ideas. She has spoke about a tax cut solely for the middle class. Every Democrat talks about cutting taxes for the middle class. Ironically, only Donald Trump actually provided a tax cut for the middle class amongst the two. He provided one for everyone. Using her logic drawn from her claims that tariffs are a national sales tax, Kamala's efforts on the Biden-Harris administration issued a 20% national tax on the American people with the plight caused by inflation, as inflation is commonly referred to as a hidden tax. From a meat and potatoes perspective, who has been better at getting their ideas across?
The Kamala campaign is built around a combination of liberal staples that are being thrown together because Plan A did not work. So her team is taking ideas from the Obama era and running on them because the progressives need to be liberal traditionalists on the fly. Her message is not going back, But she made it abundantly clear that she supports the status quo, which 4 out of every 5 Americans disapprove of. She speaks of providing a middle-class tax cut, but taxing capital gains will box in the middle-class Americans who rely on investing to make their hard-earned income go further. Those Americans will be at a negative. The idea behind cutting taxes should be to stimulate the overall economy. That is why Republicans give everyone a tax break. Not just the billionaires, but everyone. The idea is that those taxpayers with discretionary income will invest those additional funds into economic activity that will create opportunity for workers, consumers, and the economy as a whole. Providing targeted tax breaks will simply create a cost for the federal government that they hope offset with higher taxes elsewhere. Basically a redistribution of wealth with the federal government hoping to get a percentage of. Nothing like making profit off of class warfare. The plan will likely not work for the benefit of our economy, and our debt will grow faster because there is no growth in economic activity that will offset the cost. The idea that higher taxes will create an offset, but it will simply discourage investment. Nothing caused people to stop spending like a tax increase. Therefore the middle class will have short-term payout but may be without a job, if the corporations decide to offshore their jobs. I think the reason why more Americans trust Trump with the economy is because we know his ideas work. The Trump tax cuts provide lower taxes for everyone and created higher tax revenues than anticipated. Now, the early projections of the tax cuts were grim, largely because the CBO is very conservative in their projections. Do I think the economy needs another broad tax cut? I think the more important focus is not a tax cut either way, but to address inflation in a meaningful way to reduce the cost level without rampant deflation. I have yet to speak with a Kamala voter who can articulate a reason for voting for her with regurgitating her attacking points on Donald Trump. I think it is important for a voter to be casting a vote for a person, not simply against another. But that is the case sometimes. Trump, on the other hand, has run a disciplined campaign this cycle, been issue-focused and connected with the voters on the issues they feel are important, not ones that convenient for talking points, and he is focused on her actual positions and responsibilities.
Lately, Kamala's attacks reek of desperation and clear distortions, just repeating debunked talking point hoping repetitivity will make it stick. Let us end on a topic of Kamala trying to make the case that Republicans are supporting her, an attempt to counter the Democrats like Robert Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard who are supporting Trump. Liz Cheney campaigned with Kamala, but is not the most convincing voice for Republicans to switch to her. She is not a conservative voice, so there is no connection to conservative voters to help her appeal to that group. We know that Democrats have switched registrations to manipulate Republican primaries in the past, so the commercials with supposed Republicans choosing Kamala is not believable to these groups either. Just a weird last-minute tactic that does not seem to have any real chance at making an impact.
The hope for any candidate is to try to show that members of the opposing party actually supports them. Remember how interesting it was to see Joe Lieberman speak in favor of George W. Bush in 2004. Liz Cheney is not a convincing voice. She is not a conservative, and she is a person of privilege that technically runs counter to ideals of the progressive liberal base. The only reason she had an opportunity to win a seat in Congress was because of her father's reputation, that her own efforts led to a major revolt against. I get that she is completely anti-Trump, but she has no future in the Republican Party and she is just bitter and angry. Tulsi Gabbard did not do well in the Democratic primary in 2019, but she did well enough to push Kamala out. I think we are seeing a bit of voters rejecting the narrative. Kamala wants to paint Trump as out of touch with the little person, but videos of Trump connecting with McDonald's workers and customers as well as walking into a barbershop really shows a different view. Kamala is running out every celebrity, Democrat bigwig, and her set of billionaire donors, but she is not really appealing to the crowd she is targeting. Why Obama connected with the youth voter is because he did things that engaged with them. That is what Trump is doing. The scolding of voters is not an effective approach by Democrats, which is what we are seeing now. Instead of making the case, they are resorting to scolding men of color for not supporting Kamala, appealing to people's identity-based political stereotypes. There are too many contradicting messages here. If you believe that people regardless of demographics deserve the freedom of choice and to voice their individual opinion, then you should not scold them for not behaving in accordance with the preferred standard for what you want their identity to be. No candidate is entitled to a vote because of superficial characteristics in common with a voter. They must earn their vote. I really took issue with Obama doing that because it is simply wrong. But the silver lining is that it shows who Democrats are really when faced with adversity. Democrats love to create narratives and assigns attributes to their opponents. Something Republicans are not really effective at. But where Republicans do well is letting Democrats harm their own campaign. I think all Americans are somewhat glad that the election cycle is coming to a close. The political debates and discourse around elections can be stressful and create tensions amongst people who you normally do not want conflict with. There are many people who want to be on the right side of the election and cannot see the other side or do not take a defeat well. We remember how many stories of people cutting off relations with family and friends because of who they voted for. Elections and politics are important, but the people are more important. The government does not care about individual people. There are nearly 350 million legal residents alone in the United States, too many people for the government to concern themselves over. Their focus is the greater good. The people around you are the ones that will make more of a difference in your well-being than anyone elected to office. Remember that when the emotions get high, we are more similar than we are different, but those differences can be impactful at times. Please remember to go out and vote. It is important. Please exercise your voice this Tuesday if you have not already. A big thank you to all of you in the audience. Your viewership is appreciated and valued. Please follow the Christopher Peter Review on social media and continue to visit www.crcreview.com for new episodes. Thank you once again. Until next time.